We're looking at a Tuesday morning as we get going. We still have the hot heat or humidity stuff sticking around, but it could be a break in the heat, especially later today. Finally, probably going to see some thunder boomers. The grass and the plants will welcome the rain, believe it or not, as we get into the hot weather still today. Could be a break in the action, and then we really cool off the next few days as we get into the back or mid part of the week. Hey, Alexa, hey, Google, play the pulse of an H. J-Dog on the boards. And our poll question up this morning with one of our newsmakers coming up in a little bit is part of the budget, believe it or not, that recently passed or was signed by Governor Ayotte, has to do with automobile or car inspections, whether or not you ever have to get them in New Hampshire, believe it or not. And that's a question that some people and the automobile dealers, a very big employer in the state, some are concerned about some safety issues. We're going to get an update on that. But our poll question up on X to gauge your public opinion on this locally on X, the Pulse of an H, do you think the car inspections should be waived, or how do you want to put it, J-Dog, on the question?
Vehicle inspections.
Should they go away or stay? How do we put the question as well, man?
Vehicle inspections go away in the state of New Hampshire?
Should they go away? Yes or no? Should they go away? Depending on how, even if you have a vehicle that's many years and a clunker out there, should they go away? Yes or no on up on X, and we can tell you the results from yesterday. Had to do with the real estate market locally, and I don't know if J-Dog has those or not.
Give me a minute.
I'll give you a moment. We got a packed show for you coming up. One of the interesting segments in the 10 o'clock hour, all the stuff on artificial intelligence. What could it do for students? You and I and maybe the person next to you or in front of you may use the AI on our so-called smartphones a lot whenever we want to look something up or ask a question, and it filters all the information and gives you kind of a paragraph. But if you're a student in junior high school, and you're trying to figure out something, is this too much of a cheat sheet? We're going to have an interesting, John Schultz is going to join us in the 10 o'clock hour. Mike Cody, New Hampshire Business Review, will give us an update as well. We'll also hear from Dean Spiliotis in a little bit, Southern Hampshire University political science professor side of things locally and nationally. And, of course, still devastation out of Texas and the loss of life and just the complete devastation. And, I was reticent or hesitant to comment on this, but it shows you sometimes who the political haters are. I'm just pointing this out. This is a time for prayers and thoughts. And this is just such a gut wrenching, these stories of kids and dads saving their families before the floods swept the dad away. This all came up into July 4th with the swelling of this river, the Guadalupe River. It's happened before, by the way, but this was horrendous. And I've read everything online, some vitriolic stuff about blaming Donald Trump, blaming the Trump administration for this. Same people won't bring up Hurricane Helene in Asheville, North Carolina. They don't want to bring that up during the Biden. They don't want to bring that up. Nope, they don't want to bring that up. There were plenty of, the cutbacks in the federal government blaming Trump. Oh, my goodness. But they don't talk about Asheville and Hurricane Helene and the flooding, or they don't talk about L.A. and the wildfires and the mayor, Karen Bass, who was out of the country, or Gavin Newsom. But, they just anything at all. And I don't think things like this should be politicized. It's just my own opinion. It was a terrible. Could things have been forewarned or forecasted better? People forget during the worst wildfires to ever hit Los Angeles, devastated Pacific Palisades. They were forecast calling for that conditions prior to the wildfires. Should people woulda, shoulda, woulda, coulda. They're even debating whether the forecasters, the national weather forecasters, were vehement or adamant enough that these floods could happen. And Mother Nature is always the boss. I'll leave it at that. But the people that politicize this, they're just, I don't know. They would, any chance they can get, they're gonna make it about someone or something. And it's just the era we live in. Some commentary, 603-228-2080. J-Dog, our poll question result from yesterday had to do with local real estate. I think we asked, do you think the local market is cooling or leveling off? Just asking the question because of the economy and the results, J-Dog?
Will New Hampshire's housing market start to cool down? No. 78.6%. Yes, 21.4%.
Apparently, the majority may be right. You're seeing slowdowns in other parts of the country, but not necessarily here. Hey, you know what? I always like to be myself on the show. Delightful surprise this morning when I came in, and J-Dog, a good friend of ours, you would let him in. Retired, I guess we call retired Colonel Hunt Kerrigan, just back from Germany with his family. And his smarter, prettier, better half was deployed there with the Air Force, and they had the kids, and they live in Durham, and he just popped in. He's been a good friend of mine, good friend of the show, and he's back. And it was just nice to see him popping in to say hi. And he's just such a great patriot, great family, and really nice to see him and his family. So I still have his the toy soldiers on my studio dashboard that his sons gave me when they'd come in on one of our special shows to support veterans. And of course, I asked how tall they are, and he sort of held his hand up to his chest, the kids. So good to see Colonel Hunt Kerrigan back in the Granite State. Some of the other stories making news, it's interesting. When Anna Brown was with us yesterday talking about the legislative stuff locally. And one of the stories that I don't know if we touched upon, I think we did. There's an interesting story just about some of the media, a lot of media picking up. It has to do with like property owners and tenants. New Hampshire bill that passed, and Governor Ayotte, this is now like, I'll give you the facts here. Just give me one sec. But the question is over property owner versus tenant rights, if it has to be positioned that way. But it's called a no-fault eviction bill. No-fault eviction bill. And some of the folks, Representative Tim Lang, Republican from Sanbornton, was a big supporter of this. He says it's all about property rights, allowing owners to reclaim their property after completing a contract. The bill requires property owners to give tenants 60 days notice before deciding if they're going to not renew a lease, according to Lang. He believes, according to reports, that this is between the property owner and the tenant, and once the contract's fulfilled, if the owner has other plans for the property, they have every right to say, "I'm not going to renew your lease or your rent," or in this case, rent, probably month-to-month rent. Now, you've heard stories, and I've heard stories in other states where they've had issues where the tenants can kind of abuse a property owner's rights. In other words, I've heard in rentals, by the way, from people that have owned property, there's nothing better than a good renter, and there's nothing worse than a bad renter. But someone who maybe's not really taking care of the property, let's just say trashing it, in some places in states, the property owner has less rights than the tenant. And this debate is never going to be perfect. No one's ever going to say how to perfectly balance this. But if you own a property, let me just give you kind of a basic real estate education here. If you take the risk and you buy and own a property, whether you rent it or not, you own the property. Let me repeat that. You own you own the building, you own the house, you own the commercial property, whatever it is. If you own it, you're the owner. If someone rents it, I don't know if you know this, they're the renter. Now, you can say tenant and tenant rights, but they're the renter. They don't own the property. I don't know if you knew. I'm just explaining some basics to you. Now, giving 60 days notice is 2 months. And I know rents are too high, speaking of our affordable housing crisis, but if you own a property, you own it. And say you just don't want to rent it anymore. Well, if you own it and you give the 60 days before it's up, if you tell the renter, as of August, I'm no longer renting my property, you have every right to do that, wouldn't you? Why, you would think that's your right as the owner. That's your right. It's not a democracy. People think it's a perfect democracy between a tenant or a renter and an owner. No, it's the renter is renting the property. If they pay the rent and whatever the conditions of the agreement, they're renting the property. It doesn't mean they have the right to rent it the rest of their lives. I don't know if you knew that. It doesn't mean they have the right to rent it the rest of their lives. What if the owner wants to move into the property themselves and they own it? They sold a house. I'm going to move into my rental property and make it my home. They have every right if they own it. I just kind of funny how some people twist and turn these things. Oh my goodness, it's one side versus the other. Property owners are going to screw over all tenants. Now, I know, you've heard of the term sometimes when you have a landlord who owns a bunch of properties and they can be heartless, or they seem heartless at times, and they're kicking people out, or they're raising rents, and rents are very high. I've heard from many veterans on fixed incomes and living in situations where they have a good rental, but the rents have doubled. I'm not saying this is a perfect science, but some of the debate over this bill, I think it's pretty clear. If you own a property, you own it. It's yours. You own it. But we'll see where this goes. Some commentary, 603 228 208. So we come back. Car inspections, automobile inspections. Should they happen in New Hampshire? That's our poll question up on X at the Pulse of an H. Jason LaCroix, head of Auto Fair in the market, one of our great partners and sponsors and friends and sponsors of our state police. It's going to weigh in. He has concerns. That's next on the Pulse of an H.
The Boston Red Sox. Good morning, New Hampshire, live from the Outdoor Pride Studios. Now back to Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
You know, New Hampshire has a lot of registered vehicles. We don't have a plethora of public transportation. A lot of people, very common to see one or two vehicles in a driveway or a yard or parking lot at a home. And when the recent state budget was happening, Senator Dan Innes was on the show trying to broker a solution to this debate. Believe it or not, how often you should or have to get a car inspection and have someone inspect your vehicle for safety. And it was a sticking point. And Dan Ennis tried to broker something. If you get a new vehicle, maybe the first couple years you don't have to, but after that, maybe you should. But Jason LaCroix, head of Auto Fair in the market, is pretty fired up on this issue. And he's one of the more important, I think, one of the big employers in the state in terms of the automobile industry. And he joins us with a perspective on why he's passionate about safety inspection. Jason, good morning. Thanks for being on the show.
Good morning, Jack. Thanks for having me. I am passionate about this, yes.
Tell us why.
Jack, every single day I see our technicians finding critical issues with vehicles and making them safe again for the owner, for the families, and for everybody else on the road. I am passionate because I'm scared to death about what this repeal is going to do to our roads. We need safe cars and we need safe roads in New Hampshire.
And that's been a big part of our public safety segment with the state police, because they see some of the vehicles, whether they're larger or smaller. You'll sometimes see right on the side of the road some of the big rigs being inspected by state police inspectors. So where does it stand? And again, talk a little more about what your mechanics find in some cases. I think, again, it's not the maybe 8 out of 10 vehicles are safe. It's the 1 or 2 you probably worry about, right?
So the technicians bring the vehicle in. It's a licensed, trained technician brings the vehicle in and puts it on a lift. These lifts cost $12,000 to $20,000. People don't have them themselves, and you need to look underneath the vehicle to make sure the vehicle is safe. The things that we're finding are ball tires, and when I say ball, Jack, I'm talking steel belts showing. It's scary. Brakes that are down. So the minimum standard for brakes is 2 millimeters. Anything less than that, at 1, you're going to start getting metal on metal. You're not going to have the braking power that you need, and you're also going to ruin your rotors and your calipers. So not only are you checking for safety items, but you're also ensuring that you don't have a catastrophic failure or just an expensive repair. It could be a minor repair. I don't think people in New Hampshire want our roads to be less safe. I mean, we brag about being one of the safest states in the country, and I don't think it was the normal person in New Hampshire that is saying, "Hey, let's get rid of safety inspections." I think it's a group, the Americans for Prosperity, that are out there trying to give us some great talking points to find a way to get rid of this. We fight for this every single year, safe roads, and every single year there's a group that wants to eliminate the inspection program. And again, they have some great talking points, but they're all kind of inaccurate. They did a phone bank the day before and encouraged people. They fed them dinner. Come in. We're going to do a phone bank, and we're going to call people with these talking points, which sound great, but if you dive into them a little bit, they're all actually inaccurate, and it's just bad for New Hampshire. So this didn't happen with a well thought out, public safety driven process. Right. It was thrown in hastily last minute in the budget negotiations.
Yeah.
And it's not how this should work in New Hampshire.
What's interesting, Jason LaCroix of Auto Fair, when Senator Dan Ennis, I think he's a pretty practical lawmaker trying to broker a budget solution. He was on the week before the whole budget kind of became in peril when Governor Ayotte said she was going to veto it. Nothing to do with this issue, having to do with Group 2 retirement for public safety officials. And he said, Jack, you're not going to believe it. One of the sticking points in a 2-year budget, like the whole budget in New Hampshire, is car inspections. I'm like, where did this come from? It's like, so what do you encourage people to reach out and maybe learn more, talk to their state representatives, state senators in terms of safer roads? What do you think?
Yes. Please do. Let me just give you a couple of the talking points. They claim that they're going to save New Hampshire people tens of millions of dollars. So the average person owns, let's say, one car. So they're going to save $40. The tens of millions comes from the fact that there are 1.5 million vehicles that are registered in the state that are inspected annually in the state of New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And the 1.5 million vehicles have an average age of 12 years. 12 years. 15,000 miles per year. The average car is 12 years old and 180,000 miles. We just need to make sure the car is safe. And if it isn't, then we need to make sure that we swap out the tires, get new brakes, make sure that the oil isn't leaking on the manifold and lights on fire on the side of the road. The state police, they can't take on this additional burden. Mm-hmm. As they're down 70 troopers. So law enforcement, how are they going to patrol this? How are they going to handle the additional cars that are going to be broken down on the side of the road. It's just not good for New Hampshire.
Well, I know they're trying to just keep up with the truck through Troop G, because you'll see these truck inspections side of the road, where you're going along, and sometimes a blowout if they retread the tire and things like that. Keep going on to some of the other points.
So another one of the talking points is that 15% of the vehicles fail. So if only 15% of the vehicles fail, then the 85% don't need to be inspected. The problem with this math is when a vehicle comes in for its safety inspection, if it needs tires or if it needs brakes, if it needs something that fails, and they fix the car, they get new tires, they get new brakes, then it passes. So all of those vehicles that come in and get what they need to make sure the car is safe are going in the pass column, not the fail column. The next one they talk about is only 2% of the vehicle crashes are related to a mechanical failure. There is no place on a police report, on an accident report, that asks about mechanical issues. There's no place that says, what's the tire tread? What's the brake thickness?
Right.
So none of this stuff is recorded. So this data that they're putting out is real data, but it's flawed.
Interesting. Do you recommend at this point, for someone out there concerned about safety and public safety on the roadways, as you are, and I know law enforcement and public safety, to contact their state representatives and senators going forward to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we need to get back to the table and come up with a plan. Now, I'm sure that there's ways that we can improve it. And let's talk about it. Let's debate it. And let's come up with a solution that makes sense for New Hampshire, keeping our roads safe. This is a wonderful state. We get a lot of rain. We get a lot of snow. We get a lot of ice. And we just need to make sure that our cars are safe.
Yeah, as I said, Senator Dan Innes, I think, was trying to, come up with a reasonable path here versus getting rid of inspections altogether for the older vehicles. Like, obviously you get a brand new vehicle from Auto Fair, it's probably pretty good for the first year or two. If you just check the oil and, if you get a nail in the tire, you gotta fix it anyway. You can't drive. But, some of the vehicles you were mentioning, 10, 12 years old, with a lot of well over 100,000 miles, things do brakes and all that. So safer roads. Thank you, Jason. Thank you also for sponsoring our State Police segment, brought to you by Auto Fair and the State Police. We'll be hearing from them on Thursday. Jason LaCroix, Auto Fair. Appreciate you weighing in on this issue.
Thanks, Jack.
All right. We're going to take a break. We get back our own White House correspondent, John Decker, on deck, and then Dean Spiliotis with some political thoughts, both locally and nationally. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the pulse of NH.
News, Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, we are back. We are back on a Tuesday. Hope you're doing pretty well. This humidity now, J-Dog, it's more humid than anything else. I'm not complaining. Doesn't do much good to complain at all. But
It's going to be going away, not to worry.
Oh, it is. I mean, talk about a drop. I think the next few days you're going to be in the 70s. You're going to be like, what's happening? Got to get
okay with that.
Bring out your ski vest. No, I'm kidding.
Not
But
yet,
it does
not
break.
yet. Well, depending on where you are, if you're in the upper part of New Hampshire,
Yeah.
sure.
It does break later on today, maybe some thunder boomers later today, but heat sticking around for the morning. We're going to be joined by our own White House correspondent, John Decker. Trump tariff deadline. You heard in the last 24 hours, President Trump slapping 25% tariffs on Japan and just one of the countries, for example, and another, and we'll see where it goes. Letters were sent out. There's a deadline. What will these countries, will they respond? Clock's ticking on the trade stuff, on the tariff, as well as peace stuff in Gaza, and we'll see where it goes. And then a little bit later on, Dean Spiliotis will be joining us in a few moments, talking about some of the local stuff politically, and it seems that the U.S. Senate race is going to take more shape, and we'll see on some of the other races, and of course nationally. Midterms, believe it or not, it seems like they're a long way away, but they're not. Things are moving quickly. We're going to take an update on that. And Democrats nationally, what's the message? Is there a message other than they don't like Donald Trump? Is there a message? Because Trump has become the Republican Party, or the Republican Party is Trump. He's more of a populist probably than anything else, but Donald Trump had a very successful last few weeks or month or two, gotten a lot done, whether you like it or not. And what are the Democrats' message other than not liking Donald Trump? So we'll get an update on all of the above. A little bit later on, we're going to be live Thursday, right in Manchester, the state's largest city, Elm Street, the home of Alpine Gold, 1800 Elm Street. We are going to be live as they have their big open house in their brand new location in the Granite State. Gold and silver, go to alpinegold.com. And you can buy and use the word Pulse at checkout. Shipping is free. John Decker, our own White House correspondent. The letters have been sent out and some messages sent in the last 24 hours as it pertains to countries like Japan. Trade, tariff, deadline stuff. John Decker, take it away, John.
Yeah, a new deadline. You know, the deadline was supposed to be get your trade deal done by July the 9th, or you're going to see increased tariffs on your products coming into the U.S. The president confirming yesterday that deadline has now been extended to August the 1st. But at the same time, the president, for 14 countries, including Japan and South Korea, announced what those tariff rates would look like. 25% tariffs on all goods coming from Japan into the United States, and also 25% tariffs, Jack, on goods coming from South Korea into the United States. So that puts some pressure on those countries to try to reach a trade deal before that August the 1st deadline.
Now, John, in New England, obviously, a lot of people think about Canada, and
yes.
The Prime Minister Carney's been pretty tough back at the U.S., so this is a fluid one. Every country's going to be different, I imagine. Some are going to respond, some are going to respect the deadline, some are going to probably flaunt it, right?
Yeah, I think I don't have any insight with every country. We're talking about well over 100 trading partners of the U.S., but I think for some countries, they're waiting to see what happens in the federal courts, because as you know, there's a challenge as to whether or not President Trump has the unilateral power to impose those reciprocal tariffs. And if at the end of the day, the nation's highest court, the U.S. Supreme Court, rules that president, then what's the point in doing a trade deal if, you at the end of didn't have the power to do.
Right. Well, you're losing you a little bit, but
there's been some reluctance to sign off on a trade deal.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court's done for the summer, right?
They are. So that means that maybe there are no trade deals until the new term of the Supreme Court gets underway and they hear this particular issue in the new term. The new term, of course, starts the first Monday in October. So Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has spoken about this idea of several trade deals being announced within the next 48 hours. We'll have to wait and see whether or not that ultimately is the case.
And then the question, does Congress tax or trade deals tax, or does the White House have a right? It's going to be interesting. And what's also going to be interesting to see if the markets if the markets look through this. I'm talking like the stock market, if they get nervous, or do they look right through this? Because when the Middle East was much more intense, several weeks ago, markets were looking through that. Even with oil prices, they felt that.
I agree.
They felt that
it's been
Iran
a
had.
resilient financial market over the course of the last few weeks. I agree with you. And, I think that the president has often said, imagine what the financial markets would look like if the Fed in particular, decided to lower interest rates. I think he's right. There would be just a skyrocketing financial market here in the U.S.
All right. Thank you, John Decker, our own
Thank
White
you.
House correspondent. Of course, some people feel that could come in August next month. All right. Dean Spiliotis going earlier this morning, Southern New Hampshire University, political science professor. Good morning, Dean. I believe he's there, right, J-Doc? Hey, Dean, good morning. Oh, might have lost him. I'll ask him to call back. Dean Spiliotis, I believe. Let me know, J-Doc, please, because I'm in the dark a little bit here.
He'll call back.
Please call back. So we'll get him on right now. Just it's curious because if you look at the tariff stuff, the trade deadlines, you remember a few months ago? I do. just Jack pointing out memory. Dean Spiliotis is with us, Southern New Hampshire University. Good morning, Dean.
Hey, good morning, Jack.
It's interesting. We're just talking about the trade, the tariff deadlines, the letters. We're here we are jostling with Canada, Japan, South Korea, all this stuff. And I said to John Decker, our own White House correspondent, it'll be interesting to see how the markets respond. When the things were getting really intense in the Middle East with Israel and Iran before the United States struck the three, nuclear strategic sites, things were getting pretty intense. It was interesting, even oil prices, the markets were looking right through that. They just felt that Iran didn't have the muscle to disrupt things, even in the Straits of Hormuz with oil. And now with tariffs, it's going to be interesting. A few months back, even Jamie Dimon, Trump's tariffs, Trump playing with tariffs and trade is going to be deadly. It's going to push us into a recession and then some, and that's not really happened. So talk about the resiliency, not only of the economy, but of Donald Trump politically.
Yeah, I think in a sense it's become baked into the markets. I think this sort of tariff uncertainty keeping other countries on their toes is really going to be Trump's standard operating procedure. And so, we had the initial claim that we were going to get 90 deals in 90 days. That's clearly not the case. We now have the August 1st deadline. He's going particularly hard after some of the Asian countries where we tend to get some of our cheaper goods. So I think it's kind of baked into the market at this point. I mean, the uncertainty is just going to kind of be the way it goes going forward. And the markets don't seem to be responding in any real appreciable way, at least at the moment.
What do you make of, it's been quite with July 4th, it's hard to overlook the devastation and the sad story, just unbelievably got heart-wrenching stories out of Texas with the flooding of the Guadalupe River near San Antonio.
Yeah.
But also July 4th, Donald Trump signed the so-called Big Beautiful Bill into law. And even if you're one of the harshest critics, you'd have to say it was a big political win. True or false?
Oh, no, absolutely. A big, beautiful bill for given the goals that President Trump set out in his agenda and given just the inability to move almost anything through Congress at this point. No, it certainly is. And certainly in the short term, it's a big victory for him. We're going to have to wait and see where we are when we get to the midterm. I think what you're going to hear for the next year and a half is Republicans talking about tax cuts and immigration enforcement and Democrats talking about health care. And it's really going to just depend on what the electorate feels at that point.
Don't you think a lot of that will be determined by really where the consumer economy is overall?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much research that shows that it's in the end, it's usually about the economy. So if people don't really feel like their health care is jeopardized or they don't really feel like they've lost any buying power and things are still reasonably affordable, gas, et cetera, that will no doubt help Republicans in the midterm. In the end, it really comes down to the economy and the ability of both parties to message on that.
The last cycle or two, a big point after some of the Supreme Court activities, especially with Roe v. Wade and abortion, was Democrats running in New Hampshire for any office would label the Republican opponent. They're going to ban abortion. They're going to ban abortion. That Republican's going to ban abortion. Kelly Ayotte's going to ban abortion. And Republicans, for the first time, at least I think Governor Kelly Ayotte did a pretty proactive job on that issue, getting ahead of it. No, we have a 6-month law in New Hampshire. I mean, we have a law in New Hampshire, no restrictions through the first 6 months. The only restrictions come in the last, the last trimester. The point is that abortion play by Democrats, very emotional issue. I'm not minimalizing the issue. I'm not. But as a galvanizing election issue seems to have dissipated. Now I agree with you. It's going to be all about health care. Republicans are going to take away your health care, Medicaid. Republicans are going to take away your health care. Republicans are going to take away your health care. We're going to hear it. You just said it. And Chris Pappas, obviously critical of the big, beautiful bill, criticizing that very point. He's running for the Senate. Do the Democrats run a risk on that being effective if people realize that, no, not everyone's health care is being taken away, and of the folks that are, there's a work requirement and things like that? Or is that going to be a successful winning message? Republican is going to take away your health care.
It totally depends on whether or not people are feeling it, whether or not your local hospital is struggling, whether or not people who are losing their Medicaid. It's really kind of the Democrats' best tactic at this point. I mean, and then we'll wait and see what the economy looks like. If the economy is, if inflation is up, or we're getting close to a recession or in a recession, they'll switch to focus on that. But I think that's probably their best bet at this point. There's always going to be a subgroup of Democrats who are mobilized by the abortion issue. But it doesn't seem to be the linchpin that it might have been back a couple of cycles ago.
Dean, I haven't had you on a few weeks before July 4th, and I was off a little bit. I have to ask you this
Sure.
one. We haven't had a chance to talk about the New York City mayoral race and the Democrat nominee. Certainly an interesting result. Probably only about 9% of the people voted there, but it doesn't matter. What's your just 20,000-foot take on the dynamics of that situation of the Democrat nominee, proud, overt socialist, not backing down? It seems to be quite anti-Semitic, talking about different classes or, charging more to homeowners in New York City, taking on businesses, making Bernie Sanders look like a capitalist, it seems.
Well, I mean, the issue the first thing is New York is kind of a place unto itself ideologically and politically. So whatever works in New York City isn't necessarily the model for every other part of the country. It may be for some other urban areas. We'll see. He's made a lot of promises. He's going to do a lot of stuff for free. It's very hard to have things be free if you don't have the revenue coming in. So he's mentioned potentially raising taxes in some parts of the city or on some income levels. The choices for the New York mayoral race, you got Mayor Adams, who's had a rough ride so far. He's going to run as independent. Governor Cuomo, who's had his own issues. He may or may not be on the ballot also as a third party. It's kind of a funky group of choices going into it. But no, certainly Mamdani is controversial. But I think some Democrats, progressives in particular, believe that he has a message that will motivate particularly young people and maybe people who are normally part of the process on the left. But again, I don't think it's a roadmap for the entire country for Democrats.
Yeah.
New York is, having grown up in New York's a pretty unusual place,
to say the least. And then finally, we're going to see a major Democrat stand up and challenge Governor Kelly at some point here.
Jack, I ask other analysts and politicos this question probably every week. No one seems to have a good answer. I think she's in reasonably good shape at this point. I think Democrats, at least in the short term, believe that their fortunes are better served by focusing on the congressional races. That's where the action
and the
is.
Senate. Yeah,
that's where the bench is politically. People don't seem to be too focused on the governorship at the moment. So I think she's in reasonably good shape, at least for now.
Dean Spiliota, Southern Hampshire University. Make it a good Tuesday. Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Jack. Take care.
All right, we'll come back. We'll talk some gold and silver. Alpine Gold coming up next.
107.7 on the pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, Thursday, we'll be live in Manchester, downtown Manchester, 1800 Elm Street, the grand opening of Alpine Gold. And Adam Van right here, alpinegold.com. Check it out. Good morning, sir.
Thank you so much, man. Happy 4th of July. I hope everybody had a safe and happy 4th. What a great weekend it was. Perfect weather. Had that little storm right before, and then everything just got nice and cool. It was great. I hope everybody had a good time.
You too.
Yeah, so we're doing a grand opening. We're going to be on
2 days.
Yeah, 2 days. It's going to be great. We're going to have all of our members there. So we really are just we're a membership office. We manage members is what we do. We indeed, buy, sell, trade gold and silver, but we do it all on a membership. And my office manages those members. So we're going to have a lot of members there. We're going to be having hot dogs there. All, just what do you call it when it's free?
Fun stuff.
Yeah. And so
Got some giveaways too.
yeah, we're going to have
Some fun to win stuff. And
we are any funded account any UPMA, United Precious Metals Association, that has a funded account, we're gonna just draw a number out of that, and some lucky member is going to win a framed set, Granite State set of New Hampshire Goldbacks, and it's specially made. There's only one right now.
Of New Hampshire sites, basically the Goldbacks, like Bill's artwork, really.
That's right. Yeah, because we have
golden artwork.
Yeah, the artwork of New Hampshire Gold, and it's they are New Hampshire Goldbacks. So they're specific to the state. And then we also have a special frame made. And I think you can go to your Facebook, to your Instagram. And you
we'll
can see
put
that.
Another picture. We're going to be there live Thursday morning, 9 to noon.
Yeah.
Come on by and say hi. 1800 Elm Street. Plenty of parking out back.
That's right. Plenty of parking on the street. It's just a great spot. It's a great spot. You can park anywhere. There's not very much traffic there at all. And we're in a 19th century French mansion.
Cool historic building.
Yeah, historic
with horse
building.
stable building behind, and Manchester's got some neat architecture.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. This is
sort of near the north end, I'd call it.
Yeah, it's the Frank Carpenter House. He was one of the first philanthropists to move to the city. He donated a bunch of money to build City Hall and things like that. So it's pretty cool historical building. So just come by and check that out.
Let's talk about the membership for a moment. We'll continue a little bit, but you said managing members, gold. So explain that a little bit, because you can become a member very easy. You go to alpinegold.com, alpinegold.com. You can buy, one box says buy $50 in silver if you want, and put in the word Pulse at checkout. Shipping is free, or you can join. And when you join, you can join with a little, but the membership, explain that.
Yeah. When people click on join, we want to be sure when they go through there's a drop down where you have to say where you heard about us. We want to put Jack Heath in there because you're doing so much for us, and we want to be sure you get the credit for that. So pick, an authorized partner, or just type in Jack Heath. That way you get the credit for it. And we thank you so much for everything you do for us. We just, it's
a great partner and sponsor. Yeah.
It's that easy. So you can imagine, everybody has a traditional bank account, and you know how easy that is. You can deposit, withdraw, you can get debit cards with your bank account. We provide all the same similar services, but we do it with gold and silver. So if you're a gold and silver enthusiast, or if you're someone who just wants to get into it because the market's really hot right now and it's exciting, you can open an account at no cost. And then from there, you can get started on your sound money journey. Is what you can do. And it's very low cost, low entry. You can dip a toe for 10, 15, 20, $50. You get the full functionality of the account. There's no cost to an account. And
what I like too, Adam, and by the way, we're on YouTube as well now. We can watch the first hour of the show, The Pulse of an H, on YouTube. What I like is for people who've never bought or acquired gold or silver as part of their portfolio, their assets, even if it's a few $100 a month, just to put that away. There's always this, like, if you haven't tried something, the unknown. How do I do this? How does it work? And the one thing I like on your end is it's really straightforward. I joined. I have the account open. It's easy. I thought the way to do it online was very easy. It's almost more difficult sometimes to pick out a streaming service than it was to do that. But you're really a good, secure business. The business of precious metals. You can send the gold and silver to your home, your residence, if you want to put it in a safe place, or you can keep it in your account, and it's gold and silver. The other thing too is, I've said on the show repeatedly, I know the markets, stock market drives a lot of things in the economy. We're all indirectly, I guess, invested in it, but I'm not I'm more of a bricks and mortar kind of person. If I can touch it, if I can feel it, if I can hold it, like real estate. I've always felt dirt, there's only so much dirt, only so much land. Stocks, it's, some people make it a full-time hobby or profession. I'm just not I just think the thing about gold and silver is it's stood the test of time, and you're not gonna go backwards. And sometimes in investments, you can go backwards real fast. You can lose money real fast.
You certainly can. And with gold and silver,
do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, because it's a physical asset. Gold and silver is a physical asset. And on our accounts, if it's online and it's on our account, we call it in network, there's no buy sell spread. So you can get there's very low risk to try it out. Very low. If you buy in and you decide you don't like it, you sell it back to us, and it's zero buy sell spread. But gold and silver is a physical asset. It's been around for 5,000 years. It's never been worth zero. And the dollar is actually measured against gold. So 60 years ago, you could buy a house for 256 ounces of gold. Today, you can buy that same house for 256 ounces of gold. The house didn't change in value. The gold didn't change in value. The dollar changed in value. So a lot of folks, they look at it backwards. They look at gold and say, oh, it's worth $2,000 today. It'll be worth $3,000 tomorrow. Or it could go down, but it's only going down relative to the dollar. The dollar is based on gold, not the other way around.
But we've seen inflation in the last few years take a real bite out of your dollars.
You're dang right.
So
heavily.
Yeah, I mean, your dollar, if you have $100 the
Mhm.
last few years versus a couple years earlier, that $100 might have been $60.
The worst thing you can be invested in right now is the American dollar. Everything else is going up. Stocks, home prices, gold, silver. Silver, by the way, is in a unique position to rise. And I think it's going to be over $46 an ounce by September is my prediction.
Well, we'll come back with that. But, you mentioned, we just have so much debt. It was debated a little bit, maybe not enough, some would say, in the recent, bill, but we have $37 trillion debt. People aren't even talking about Social Security in 7 years. What will that be worth? Does it take a 20% haircut? You can't have that much debt with that much interest being paid, and that's all dollar driven. And it just doesn't strengthen the dollar.
If we've got time, to give people perspective, if you had a million seconds of your life is 11 days, 1 billion seconds of your life is 31 years. 37 trillion is something like 35,000 years in seconds. I mean, that's how much debt we're in.
Yeah.
A million is 11 days.
And that's why these hard assets hold value, because there's so much uncertainty on that debt, how we're going to pay for it, how our future, the interest. Hold the thought. We'll come back, talk some silver. Adam with Alpine Gold. Thursday, right? People come by in the afternoon or morning, right? All day.
That's right. Thursday.
1800 Elm Street.
Yeah. 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. is the grand opening, and you're going to be there in the morning.
9 to noon. Hey, Alexa, Google Play the Pulse of NH. Artificial intelligence in the next hour. John Schultz is going to talk about, is it kind of the cheat factor for students, young students? Is it affecting critical thinking? Interesting, coming up. Hey, Alexa, Google Play the Pulse of NH.